Okay, so welcome back. In part 2 of the video then we're going to start by looking at how to find a score that corresponds to a particular percentile. Now there is also a bit of a process that we have to go through in order to achieve that goal, and that is outlined for you right here in steps 1, 2, and 3. Now this is a little bit confusing. I've tried to make it as clear as possible, but please make sure you ask me if you don't understand, okay? Now the process that we have to go through here is outlined as I said, so I'm going to go through that with you using the example listed here, which says for the contest scores in example 3, in other words the same table that we've been looking at, which score is in the 75th percentile. In order to figure that out, we go through this process that I've outlined for you. So in step 1 it says calculate n times p. So in our example, we said n is 12. And since we're interested in the 75th percentile, in this case, our p-value is 0.75. So change your percent to a decimal. So the first thing we do is calculate n times p. So 12 times 0.75 is 9. Now, that doesn't mean that the score of 9 is in the 75th percentile. We have to look at step 2, which says if n times p is a whole number, which it is, 9 is a whole number, then the position of the score is the mean or average of the 9th score, that would be, and the one above it, which would be the 10th score. So let's make a note here. So that's a whole number. So the next thing we have to do is take the average of the 9th and 10th, so the one above it, scores. Now, when you're finding the average of the 9th and 10th scores, that would be the 9th and 10th lowest score. So you're going to begin counting from the bottom of your chart. So we'll look back up to the table. Let's scroll back up there. If we want the 9th and 10th lowest scores, okay, so the low scores start on this end of the table. This table goes from a score of 5 up to 19. So the 9th lowest score, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We want the average of the 9th and 10th lowest scores. So we're going to take the average of 16 and 17, divide them by 2 to find the average. So 16.5, so therefore the 75th percentile is 16.5. So if you scored 16.5 on the contest, you're in the 75th percentile. Part B, we're going to go through the same process to find what score corresponds to the 95th percentile. So in this case, n times p would be 12 times 0.95. And 12 times 0.95 is 11.4. So looking at our instructions, it says if n times p is a decimal number, round the number up to find the position of the score. So we'll say here decimal, this is a decimal number. So we're going to round up to the 12th lowest score. Now if we go back and look at your table, there's 12 scores altogether. So the 12th lowest score is actually going to be the highest score. That won't always be the case. It's just in this particular case, that's exactly how many scores we had. So let's make a note here. Since there are 12 scores, the 12th lowest is actually the highest score, which in this case was a score of 19. So we'll say, therefore, the 95th percentile is 19, a score of 19. And the last statistical measure we're going to look at is something called a weighted mean. A weighted mean is used when each component in a calculation has a different weighting factor. And so the example I've given you here is something that you could all relate to because it's an example of how we would go about calculating your own marks in this course. So as you know, in the course we have 4 categories of achievement: knowledge, application, thinking, and communication. But when your marks are calculated, they are not all considered equal. So 40% of your mark comes from the knowledge category, 30% from application, and 15% from each of the other 2. So if you get a test back, and these are your levels, 2, -3, 3 plus, and 2, I'm going to show you the process that you would have to go through in order to change those levels into an overall percent. So what we'll do first is write the weights that we were just referring to above each category. So we said knowledge is 40, application is 30, thinking is 15, and communication is 15. And the other thing we have to do is convert these levels to percents. So I'm not too sure how familiar you are with those direct conversions, but a 2- is a 62, a level 3 is a 75, a 3 plus is a 78, and a level 2 is a 65. So to calculate a weighted mean, if you look up to your instructions here, it says multiply each value by its weighting factor, add them up, then divide by the sum of the factors. So that's what we're going to do here. So we need to multiply each number by its weighting factor. So for example, we need to take the mark of 62 and multiply it by 40. We're going to add to that the mark received in application times the weight of the application section, plus the mark received in thinking times the weight of the thinking section, plus the mark for communication times the weight of the communication section. And we are to divide by the sum of all the weighting factors, which, since we're talking about marks, would be 100, as in the 4 categories add up to 100%. Okay, so overall, this corresponds to a mark of 69%. So therefore, your overall mark is 69%. And that is the end of this lesson.